In shadows deep where doubts reside, they say, religion's roots, a scheme by clever minds, bend the masses' will and hold their sway. A few devise this intricate display, crafted with tales that fear and awe entwines. In shadows deep where doubt resides, they say, they taught of gods to keep them in array, yet 'twas the same God's existence they'd malign, to bend the masses' will and hold their sway. Yet even skeptics in their hearts portray a flicker of belief they can't consign. In shadows deep where doubt resides, they say, when signs of wrath emerge in stark array, and forces God feel fierce confines, to bend the masses' will and hold their sway. Efforts to escape, like night, gives way. Deep within the human soul's confines, in shadows deep where doubt resides, they say, to bend the masses' will and hold their sway. Welcome back to my Fortress of Theology. I'm Jonathan, the Cage Stage Crusader. I'm on a pilgrimage through the Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin. Today, I'm continuing with Book 1, Chapter 3, Section 2. So let's get into it. Calvin writes, it is most absurd, therefore, to maintain, as some do, that religion was devised by cunning and craft of a few individuals as a means of keeping the body of the people in due subjection. Well, there was nothing which those very individuals, while teaching others to worship God, less believed than the existence of a God. I readily acknowledge that designing men have introduced a vast number of fictions into religion with the view of inspiring the populace with reverence or striking them with terror, and thereby rendering them more obsequious. But they never could have succeeded in this had the minds of men not been previously imbued with that uniform belief in God, from which, as from its seed, the religious propensity springs. It is altogether incredible that those who, in the matter of religion, cunningly imposed on their ruder neighbors were altogether devoid of a knowledge of God. For though in old times there were some, and in present day not a few are found who deny the being of a God, yet, whether they will or not, they occasionally feel the truth which they are desirous not to know. We do not read of any man who broke out into more unbridled and audacious contempt of the deity than Caesar Caligula, and yet none showed more greater dread when the indication of divine wrath was manifested. Thus, however unwilling, he shook with terror before the God of whom he professedly studied to condemn. You may every day see the same thing happening in his modern imitators. The most audacious despiser of God is most easily disturbed, trembling at the sound of a falling leaf. How so, unless in vindication of the divine majesty which smites their consciences, the more strongly, the more they endeavor to flee from it. They all indeed look out for a hiding place where they may conceal themselves from the presence of the Lord, and again efface it from their mind. But after all their efforts, they remain caught within the net. Though the conviction may occasionally seem to vanish for a moment, it immediately returns and rushes in with a new impetuosity, so that any interval of relief from the gnawing of conscience is not unlike the slumber of the intoxicated or the insane, who have no quiet rest and sleep, but are continually haunted with dire, horrific dreams. Even the wicked themselves, therefore, are an example of the fact that some idea of God exists in every human mind. I got a number of points raised in this passage here. One, the absurdity of religion's origin. The notion that religion was devised by a few individuals to control the masses is absurd because these individuals allegedly created a religion to maintain people's subjection. But paradoxically, these same individuals didn't believe in the existence of God themselves. Second point, acknowledgement of fictions in religion. It is acknowledged that manipulative individuals introduce many fictional elements into religion. These elements aim to inspire reverence and fear in the general population, leading to increased obedience. However, their success wouldn't have been possible without a pre-existing belief in God. Third point made, uniform belief in God's existence. The religious propensity within humans springs from a uniform belief in God. This belief serves as the seed from which religious inclinations grow. Fourth point, denial of God's existence, but involuntary acknowledgement. Although some individuals historically and presently deny God's existence, they occasionally experience involuntary moments of acknowledging the truth they try to avoid. Even adamant deniers of God are affected when signs of divine wrath appear. In his fifth point, he uses Caligula as an example. Caligula, a historical figure known for his contempt of the divine, displayed great dread when faced with indications of divine wrath, and yet, despite his professed condemnation of God, he was terrified by God's power. Sixth point, modern imitators' similar reactions. Modern individuals who imitate Caligula's contempt for God exhibit similar reactions. The boldest despisers of God are easily disturbed, even minor occurrences like a fallen leaf. This reaction stems from the divine majesty's impact on their consciences. Seventh point made by Calvin, futile attempts to escape God's presence. Individuals attempt to find hiding places to escape God's presence and erase God from their minds. Despite their efforts, they remain caught within the net of their awareness of God's existence. The eighth point, inescapable conviction of God's existence. Even the wicked serve as an example that some idea of God always exists in the human mind. This conviction may momentarily seem to vanish, but it always returns with greater force, akin to a disturbing dream. This section talks about how some people believe that religion was made up by a few clever folk to control everyone else. These manipulators didn't actually believe in God themselves. While it's true some people added fake stories to religion to make others scared or respectful, this wouldn't have worked if everyone didn't already have a basic belief in God. Even though there have been people who say there's no God, they sometimes can't help but feel like there might be something true about God. Even those who loudly deny God, like the historical figure Caligula, got really scared when they thought God was angry. People today who act like they don't believe in God also get easily frightened by small things. This happens because deep down the idea of God affects their conscience. And people try to ignore God and pretend they don't believe, but it's like they're caught in a trap. No matter how hard they try, they can't get away from the thought of God. Even the bad guys show that everyone has some idea of God in their minds, even if they don't admit it. This idea doesn't go away completely. It might seem to sometimes to leave, but it always comes back, making them feel more uneasy, like having bad dreams. Let's break down these points individually more deeply. The absurdity of religion's origin. The point being made here is that it doesn't make sense to think that religion was created by a small group of people to control others. This idea is quite strange and doesn't hold up when we actually examine it closely. Think of cult leaders, for example. Imagine someone claiming that a single person created an entire religious movement just to control their followers. For instance, we think about the notorious cult leaders who have emerged throughout history. It's evident that their motives were often power and manipulation rather than genuine religious beliefs. In ancient times, rulers sometimes used religion to keep their subjects obedient. However, this doesn't mean that the rulers themselves didn't believe in the existence of higher powers. The examples of pharaohs in ancient Egypt or Roman emperors who are often deified by the people demonstrate how rulers intertwined religion and power. In Matthew 23, verses 1 to 7, in that passage, Jesus criticizes the religious leaders of his day for their hypocrisy. They teach religious principles but don't follow them themselves, showing a similar paradox that Calvin mentions. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat, so do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do, for they preach but do not practice. As in Matthew 23, 1 to 3. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13, the prophet Isaiah addresses the hypocrisy of people who honor God with their lips but lack genuine belief. This connects to the idea that individuals can promote religious practices for control while not truly believing. The Lord said, because these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. Matthew 15, verses 8 and 9, Jesus quotes Isaiah's words to emphasize the importance of true devotion over outward show. This reflects the point that those who promote religion for control might lack genuine belief. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. In essence, the notion that religion is purely a tool for control and manipulation by a select few contradicts the complexities of human nature, historical examples, and biblical teachings of genuine faith and devotion. The second point, acknowledgement of fictions in religion. It is acknowledged that manipulative individuals introduce many fictional elements into religion. These elements aim to inspire reverence and fear in the general population, leading to increased obedience. However, their success wouldn't have been possible without a pre existing belief in God. This point highlights the recognition that certain people have introduced made up stories and fabricated falsehoods and fabricated elements into religious practices. These falsehoods were strategically designed to make people feel more respectful and afraid, ultimately leading to greater obedience to religious leaders and teachings. Consider religious symbols and artifacts. Instances considered where the instances where religious leaders or institutions have used symbolic objects or artifacts to inspire reverence. These might include relics, holy water, or sacred texts, and while these items can hold deep meaning for believers, their use can also be manipulated to elicit specific emotions or actions. Miracles and myths. Throughout history, there have been stories of miraculous events associated with religious figures. Some of these stories might be based on real events, while others could be exaggerated or completely invented to strengthen faith and or control. Colossians 2, verse 8, the Apostle Paul warns against being taken captive by philosophy and empty deceit that's based on human traditions rather than Christ. This aligns with the idea that manipulative elements can be introduced into religion. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy or empty deceit, according to human traditions, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. In Matthew 23, Jesus condemns the religious leaders for appearing righteous on the outside while being full of hypocrisy and lawlessness within. This relates to the use of the external symbols to create an appearance of holiness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. You can also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. It's Matthew 23, verse 27, 28. In Mark 7, verses 6 to 8, Jesus criticizes religious leaders for elevating their traditions over God's commandments. This connects to the idea of introducing man made elements into religion for control. And he said to them, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written? This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. This point emphasizes that while manipulative individuals might introduce fictional elements to elicit specific responses, their success relies on a pre existing belief in God or higher powers. It also underscores the importance of discernment in evaluating religious practices and teachings. The third point Calvin makes, uniform belief in God's existence. The religious propensity within humans springs from a uniform belief in God. This belief serves as a seed from which religious inclinations grow. This point highlights the idea that there is a natural inclination within humans to believe in the existence of a higher power or God. This inherent belief acts as the foundation from which religious thought and inclinations develop. The universal concept of divinity. Across various cultures and civilizations throughout history, there have been recurring themes of believing in gods, deities, or some form of divine presence. Just a common human tendency to recognize a higher power. Seeking meaning. Many people have an innate desire to find meaning, purpose, and explanation for the mysteries of life and the universe. This often leads them to consider the existence of a guiding force or creator. In Romans 1:19-20, the Apostle Paul writes about the evidence of God's existence being visible through creation. This aligns with the notion of a universal belief in God's existence. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. There. You're in the frame of the camera. There. Everybody can see the cute little kitty. See? Cute little kitty. Scholastica Thaumaturgus. The fourth. Yeah. Princess of Heretic Hunters. Yeah. Ecclesiastes 3:11. The book of Ecclesiastes reflects on the eternity placed in the hearts of humans by God. This suggests a built-in awareness of something beyond the temporal. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. That's so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Right? Right? Yeah. In Acts 17, verses 27-28, Paul speaks to the Athenians about the God in whom they live and move, emphasizing the innate connection between humans and God, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being, even as some of your poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. This point underscores the human inclination to believe in God's existence, which lays the groundwork for various religious beliefs and practices. The concept of a higher power resonates deeply within individuals and influences their search for meaning and connection. Fourth point, denial of God's existence, but involuntary acknowledgement. Although some individuals historically and presently deny God's existence, they occasionally experience involuntary moments of acknowledging the truth they try to avoid. Even adamant deniers of God are affected when signs of divine wrath appear. This point highlights the paradox that even though some people strongly deny the existence of God, they sometimes can't help but have moments where they recognize the truth they're trying to reject. This can be especially evident when they encounter situations that seem to suggest divine intervention or consequences. Imagine someone who is a firm atheist and consistently denies the existence of God. However, when faced with a life threatening situation or a sudden tragedy, they might involuntarily find themselves calling out to a higher power for help or comfort. Or when facing moral choices, consider a person who denies God's existence but still grapple with moral dilemmas and have an innate sense of right and wrong. These moments could hint at an underlying awareness of moral principles grounded in a higher authority. Psalm 14, verse 1, the psalmist acknowledges that some people say in their hearts that there is no God. This verse implies that even though they deny God, their hearts might still bear a knowledge of God's existence. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, they do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. Going back to Romans chapter 1, once again, 18-21, Paul writes about people suppressing the truth about God's existence. Despite their efforts to deny, they are aware of God through what has been made. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. In Jonah chapter 1, verses 3-5, the story of Jonah illustrates how, even in the midst of trying to flee from God, people can't escape his presence. Jonah, despite his denial, finds himself in a situation that forces him to acknowledge God's involvement. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. This point emphasizes the internal struggle that some individuals experience between denying God's existence and involuntarily recognizing the presence of a higher power. Moments of crisis or moral reflection can reveal an inherent understanding that even adamant deniers of God can't fully suppress. The fifth point Calvin made, Caligula's example. Caligula Caesar, a historical figure known for his contempt of the divine, displayed great dread when faced with indications of divine wrath, and despite his professed condemnation of God, he was terrified by God's power. This point centers around Caligula, a historical figure known for his strong contempt for the divine and religious matters. Interestingly, even though he publicly denounced God and exhibited this disdain for religious beliefs, there were instances when he reacted with profound fear upon encountering signs of divine wrath. This contradiction underscores that idea that a deep seated understanding of a higher power can influence even the most adamant desires. For a bit more context, look at some biographical information about Caligula. Caligula, also known as Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Why don't we have names that long anymore? We need longer names. He was a Roman emperor who ruled from the year 73 to 41 AD. His reign was marked by extreme extravagance, autocratic behavior, and a disregard for traditional norms. He famously claimed divinity for himself, insisting that people worship him as a god. Caligula's insistence on being worshipped as a god illustrated his contempt for traditional religious beliefs. He even placed statues of himself in temples alongside those of the gods. And yet, despite his open rejection of the divine and his attempts to elevate himself to a godlike status, there are recorded instances where he displayed fear and dread, particularly when he believed he was facing divine wrath. To give this some biblical context, let's look at the book of Daniel. The story of Nebuchadnezzar, a Babylonian king, in Daniel chapter 4 serves as a biblical example of someone who initially exalted himself but was later humbled by divine intervention. This parallels Caligula's behavior and fear when faced with divine consequences. All of this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. He was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built for my mighty power, as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?" While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you." It's in Daniel chapter 4, verses 28 to 31. Now, according to historical accounts, Caligula ordered his soldiers to march into the sea and attack it with their swords, apparently in a fit of rage against Neptune, the god of the sea. This incident was followed by the sudden appearance of a storm, leading Caligula to quickly retreat and beg for Neptune's forgiveness. This event exemplifies the contradiction of denouncing divine entities while experiencing a visceral fear of divine retribution. The example of Caligula highlights how even those who openly reject the divine can be profoundly affected by moments that seem to suggest divine intervention or wrath. Testament to the complex interplay between human beliefs and the innate recognition of a higher power's presence. The sixth point Kelvin made, modern imitators and their similar reaction. Modern individuals who imitate Caligula's contempt for God exhibit similar reactions. The boldest despisers of God are easily disturbed, even minor occurrences like a falling leaf. This reaction stems from the divine majesty's impact on their consciences. This point discusses the behavior of individuals in modern times who emulate the contempt for God displayed by figures like Caligula. These individuals, like Caligula, can show remarkable sensitivity and unease even when confronted with seemingly trivial occurrences such as a falling leaf. This unease is a result of the profound impact on divine majesty on their consciences. Vocal atheists, for example. Some vocal atheists in modern society openly express their skepticism or rejection of religious beliefs. However, when faced with situations that might suggest a higher power's presence or intervention, they might experience moments of doubt or unease. Individuals who confidently proclaim their disbelief in God might still experience moments of fear or unease in the face of the unknown. Existential questions or encounters with the unexplainable can trigger profound reactions. In Psalm 53, verse 1, the psalmist speaks of the fool who denies God's existence. This verse acknowledges the reality that even those who deny God can be affected by a moment that challenge their convictions. The fool says in their heart, "There is no God. They are corrupt, doing abominable iniquity. There is none who does good." Going back once again to Paul's writings in Romans chapter 1, he discusses how even though people knew God, they suppressed the truth. The suppression might manifest in various ways, including reactions to the divine. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Modern examples, such as existential anxiety. Think of a modern individual who staunchly denies the existence of God and firmly believes in a purely materialistic worldview. This person might still experience moments of existential anxiety when considering the vastness of the universe, the mystery of consciousness, or the ultimate meaning of life. This point illustrates how even individuals who imitate historical figures in contempt for God can exhibit similar reactions and unease about and doubt. The profound impact of the divine majesty on human consciousness transcends declarations of disbelief and can trigger unexpected moments of reflection and questioning. Point 7, futile attempts to escape God's presence. Individuals attempt to find hiding places to escape God's presence and erase God from their minds. Despite their efforts, they remain caught within the net of their awareness of God's existence. The futile attempts to escape God's presence, this point emphasizes how some individuals endeavor to hide from the presence of God or erase thoughts of God from their minds. Despite their efforts, they find themselves unable to escape the pervasive awareness of God's existence. People might try to fill their lives with constant distractions, busyness, or even addictive behaviors in an attempt to avoid facing questions about God's existence and their spiritual beliefs. Some individuals may actively avoid discussions or situations related to religion or spirituality, hoping to suppress their awareness of God's presence. In Psalm 139, verses 7 to 12, the psalmist poetically describes the impossibility of escaping God's presence. This passage illustrates the futility of trying to hide from God. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take to the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. Proverbs 28, verse 1, the proverb speaks about the wicked fleeing when no one pursues them. It can relate to those who try to escape God's presence. Even when no external threat is present, the wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as lions. Persistent intrusion. Consider a person who actively avoids religious discussions, changes the topic whenever spirituality is brought up, and surrounds themselves with secular influences. Despite their efforts, thoughts about God or higher powers might intrude unexpectedly, leaving them unable to fully escape the awareness of divine existence. This point highlights the human tendency to attempt to evade the reality of God's presence and suppress thoughts of the divine. However, the inescapable nature of God's presence persists, leaving individuals caught within the awareness of a higher power, despite their efforts to avoid it. Point 8, inescapable conviction of God's existence. Even the wicked serve as an example that some idea of God always exists in the human mind. This conviction may momentarily seem to vanish, but it always returns with greater force akin to a disturbing dream. This point underscores that even individuals who may be considered morally wrong or wicked still demonstrate a persistent awareness of the existence of God. This awareness might appear to fade at times, but it always resurfaces with heightened intensity, similar to the way unsettling dreams repeatedly return. Some examples: unexpected thoughts. A person who habitually rejects religious beliefs might experience moments when thoughts about God or higher powers unexpectedly come to mind, despite their best efforts to ignore or dismiss them. Moments of reflection. Even those who live a life contrary to a moral or ethical principles might experience moments of introspection, prompting them to consider deeper questions about the nature of existence and the possibility of a higher power. Turning once again to Romans, this time chapter 2, verses 14 to 15. Paul discusses the Gentiles who do not have the Mosaic law, but still show the works of the law written on their hearts. This suggests an inherent knowledge of right and wrong, and by extension, recognition of a higher moral authority. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. The book of Ecclesiastes speaks about God placing eternity in the hearts of humans. This points to a built in awareness of something beyond the temporal. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Some modern examples: imagine a person who actively denies God's existence and lives a lifestyle that is morally questionable. Yet during moments of solitude or reflection, they might find themselves grappling with questions about purpose, morality, and a higher power, even if only fleetingly. This point emphasizes the underlying and unshakable awareness of God's existence that persists within the human mind, regardless of one's moral standing or deliberate efforts to suppress it. Even the most hardened individuals experience moments when the conviction of divine existence becomes undeniable. In whispers of doubt, the heart's secret keep, ideas of God within minds entwine, convictions resurface from dreams deep. Amidst wicked paths where shadows may creep, an innate knowing like stars that align. In whispers of doubt, the heart's secret keep. Defiant denials may seem to sweep, yet dormant beliefs a spark does define. Convictions resurface from dreams deep, like winds that tease leaves from slumber's sweep. A truth stirs within, a truth so divine. In whispers of doubt, the heart's secret keep. Caligula's pride, though he chose to steep in terror, succumbed. Powers malign, convictions resurface from dreams deep. Modern hearts mirror the secrets they reap, yet fragments of faith in their souls intertwine. In whispers of doubt, the heart's secrets keep, convictions resurface from dreams deep. Until next time, continue to follow Jesus, who is the way.